Have you ever noticed that the hardest part of changing your life isn't necessarily the change itself, it's surviving the reactions that follow? You tell someone what you're trying and they pause and look at you funny, or they ask a careful question, or they say something like, "I just want you to be realistic," or "What's the long-term plan?" And later, maybe that night or the next morning, you hear their voice in your head and you start replaying the conversation and you wonder if maybe you sounded impulsive or if they saw something that you didn't. And before long, the change that you felt so clear and excited about starts to feel shaky, and staying exactly where you are suddenly feels safer than moving forward. In this video, I want to show you a steadier way to talk about change. One that doesn't let other people's doubt mess you up before you even get started on your new path. Stay tuned. So when people react with hesitation, concern, or questions, we tend to treat their response as information, as if their doubt means that they're seeing something more clearly than we are, and we're the ones who might be missing the full picture. But most of the time, their reaction has very little to do with the quality of our decision. It comes from their own fear of change, or their need for things to stay predictable, or their discomfort with uncertainty, especially uncertainty that they can't control. The problem is that we absorb that uncertainty without realizing it, and then we start carrying it around as if it belongs to us. So instead of asking, does this change still feel right for me? We can start asking, can I justify this well enough? Unfortunately, that stops us in our tracks. Other people's doubt gets mistaken for guidance. We need a way to communicate our changes that keeps their uncertainty from becoming ours. So let me give you an example. Imagine that a close friend comes to you and tells you that they're thinking about leaving a relationship they've been in for a really long time. And you don't interrupt them, you listen carefully. But as they're talking, you can't help but notice your own reactions starting to surface. Maybe you've always liked their partner, and you picture upcoming holidays or past shared history or the version of their life you're used to seeing. And you feel a quiet sense of loss at the idea of that other person disappearing from your world. Or maybe you're really worried. Maybe you wonder how your friend is going to handle this breakup, whether they might be lonely or whether they'll struggle financially, or if they'll be okay on their own. Maybe part of you thinks, well, if they could just work on this one thing, then the relationship would be fine. So none of those reactions are malicious, right? They're human. But now imagine that because of your hesitation and the questions you asked or the concern in your voice, your friend starts to doubt herself. And because of that doubt, she stays in the relationship. And 3 months later, you find out that the relationship deteriorated even further. Things got worse, things got harder, more painful, and more complicated for your friend. And now she's in even more difficulty than she was before. If you learned that she stayed because of how you reacted, because your uncertainty made her second guess herself, how would that sit with you? Most of us would feel awful. We wouldn't want our reactions to be the reason someone stayed in something that they knew was wrong for them. And yet, we can't help reacting from our own point of view, from our own fears, attachments, and what we think is best. That doesn't make us bad friends. It just makes us human. But it does mean something important. Other people, when they react to you, are reacting from their lives, not from inside your skin, living your days, carrying your history, or sensing what you're sensing. And just as they don't want responsibility for your choices, you don't want to hand that responsibility to them either. That's why we can't give other people's reactions too much weight. We can't treat those reactions as verdicts on our decisions or actions. Other people aren't you. They can only react from their point of view, and that's perfectly fine. What's important is that you protect yourself from adjusting your behavior because of those reactions. So if we don't want other people's reactions to steer our choices, we need a different way to communicate change, one that keeps responsibility right where it belongs. Let's talk about how to do that. This different kind of communication that we want to use in these situations, this isn't to persuade people or to make them feel more comfortable. Neither is it about proving you've thought of everything or that you're completely right or convincing everyone that you know exactly what you're doing and that this choice is the best ever. Instead, it comes from a place of clarity. So we're not presenting a finished plan necessarily here. We're just sharing this new direction that we're exploring. And if we do it in a way that maintains a subtle boundary that says to the other person, this decision is mine to live with. When communication comes from that place, it changes the dynamic. So people can still have their opinions and their reactions. They can still worry about you or question you or disagree with you. But if their reactions don't automatically become something that you have to carry with you, that's the kind of communication we want to focus on. So imagine you're thinking about stepping back from a long-term commitment. Maybe it's a relationship, a job, a role you've been in for years, or even a version of yourself people are used to. You're not blowing your life up, you're just trying something a little different for a while. But you know the moment that you say this out loud, there are going to be people in your life who are going to have opinions. So you start talking about it the way most of us do. You go into defense mode, you explain your reasoning, you walk them through how long you've been thinking about this. You list the pros and cons maybe, or you reassure them that you're being very careful. But somewhere in that conversation, you're probably going to feel the shift in your own energy. They might ask another question or point out a risk that you already considered, or they might tell you that they're just concerned about you. And suddenly, instead of standing strong in your decision, you're trying to manage their reaction. You can leave the conversation feeling unsettled and less sure than when you went into it. And that's the pattern we're trying to avoid here. So let's try something different. Let's imagine the same situation, but the way you communicate it this time is going to be different. So you're not laying out your case or asking for their agreement. You're simply going to name what it is that you're trying and what that means right now. So you could say something like, I'm trying stepping back from this relationship for a while. I don't have everything figured out yet, but it feels like the right direction for me. I'm not asking for advice right now. I just wanted to let you know. And then you stop. Now notice what's missing. There's no over-explaining here, no invitation for them to evaluate whether your reasoning is sound or not. You're not closing the door forever, but you're also not putting the decision up for debate. You're simply sharing a direction that you're exploring and keeping the responsibility for it where it belongs, with you. Okay, so let's talk about what's actually holding that message together. There's a simple structure underneath it. It's like a container that keeps the conversation from drifting into doubt and debate. So first, you clearly name what you're trying. You don't turn it into a long explanation. You just state the direction that you're exploring. So that might sound something like this. I'm stepping back from this relationship for a while. Or I'm changing how I work this year. Or I'm taking some space to figure out what I want next. Then you acknowledge uncertainty without inviting evaluation. You're honest that you don't have everything figured out yet, but you don't hand that uncertainty to the other person to solve. You're just letting them know that you're in the process, not asking them to weigh in on whether the process is valid. So that might sound something like this. I don't have everything figured out yet, but this feels like the right direction for me right now. Or I'm still learning what this looks like, and I'm giving myself time to see how it unfolds. And finally, you gently guide the other person's response. You let them know what you are and aren't looking for right now, whether that's advice, reassurance, or problem solving, so they don't fill in the gap on their own. For example, you might say, I'm not looking for advice right now. I just wanted to share where I'm at. Or, I'm not asking for feedback yet. I just wanted you to know what I'm thinking about. When those three pieces are present, something important happens. The conversation stays grounded, and the responsibility stays with you. And the other person doesn't have to guess what role they're supposed to play. That's why this works so well. And it makes it easier actually for both of you. Now, even when you communicate this way, some people are still going to offer their advice. They can't help it. And that doesn't mean you did anything wrong. A lot of people hear uncertainty and feel an urge to help, or they hear change and they may feel nervous, so they jump in with suggestions, warnings, or questions. When that happens, you don't have to argue or start defending yourself, but you also don't have to absorb what they're saying. What helps is a short, steady response that brings the conversation back to where you meant for it to be. So, for example, you might say, I hear what you're saying. I'm not looking for advice right now. I just wanted to share where I am. Or that makes sense. Now I'm still in the middle of this, so I'm going to give myself a little time before I talk it through. Or even, I appreciate your concern. I'm okay though with sitting with this for a bit. None of those statements shut the other person down. They don't blame the other person. They just reestablish the boundary that you already set. And if the advice keeps coming, it's okay to repeat yourself. You're not being rude. You're just keeping responsibility for the decision where it belongs. What you do have to be careful of is if the advice and the concern and the questions come back at you later on. In truth, there's really nothing wrong with considering all angles of a decision, except for that it takes you back into that overthinking spiral that can just take you further away from your inner voice, which knew the direction you were supposed to go anyway. So I would say oftentimes if you find yourself spiraling with whatever the other person said, try to return to that inner voice. Open the conversation again with your intuition. Why did I want to do this choice? Oh yeah, that was why. Because if you sit down in a calm place, let your world go quiet, and listen to that inner self again, your answer is going to come back just as powerful as it was before, despite all the questions, concerns, whatever, that the other person brought up. So here's your investigation of the week. Think about one change that you're currently exploring. Could be a relationship shift, a work adjustment, a boundary that you're experimenting with, or a direction that you haven't fully committed to yet. And now ask yourself 2 questions. First, who have I been over-explaining this to? Not because you're doing anything wrong or because they're doing anything wrong, but because their reactions are making you second-guess yourself. Write those people down, as that will help you gain some distance from any doubt that they may have created inside you. Second, what would it sound like to share this without asking for input? So you might try this new way of communicating with someone, or even just practice it in front of a mirror. If it helps, you can write it out first and then read it out loud. If there's one person it feels safe to practice with, try sending a short message this week that follows this format. Something like, I'm trying blank for a while. I don't have everything figured out yet, but it feels like the right direction for me. I'm not looking for advice right now, just wanted to share where I'm at. Then pay attention to what happens next. Not just in the conversation and what the other person says, but inside of you. Do you feel steadier and stronger afterward? More anchored in your own sense of direction? That's the signal you're watching for. Because the goal here isn't to manage other people's reactions. We can't do that. It's to notice what helps you stay grounded when you're in the middle of change. So if this video connected with you and you've been sensing that something in your life no longer fits the way it used to, my Signals Journal can help you pay attention to that. It's a short guided journal that walks you through the 7 subtle clues that often show up when your life is asking for a change. You'll find it for free at the link below. And in the next video, we're going to build on what we started here. So check that out on the end screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you there.